Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Now, you can ask those questions in Makana. Of course, you can ask the questions. You can vote on the questions. You can talk about the questions all there. If you don't know how to get there, all you got to do is go to officehours.global/join, and you can sign up for the email, and then you get emails. You'll get links to the Discord and to Makana, and you'll get told what is happening every day. If you're not there, don't worry about it. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Just throw your questions in, and if they're well-formed, you haven't asked them a couple times in a row, and then we'll get to them. So anyway, let's jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Eric Block in Tel Aviv, Israel, comes in first this morning with, I'm running Zoom ISO on an M1 Mac Mini ever since the first beta and still on iOS Monterey. I'd like to upgrade to Sonoma, but especially wary of the infamous orange dot and concerned that the current app that cancels it might not work. Advice or reassurance?
Yeah, we covered that in the past, and there is now a way to do this. There's an instructions that Apple provides. So they've moved past we're not going to help you with it. We were using a script that allowed us to kind of disable the dot, but it also did a bunch of security disablements as well. So do a search for it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I know that Apple has now posted instructions. You basically have to go into, the emergency mode or whatever of the Mac to get in there, and you can turn it off there. So there's a script that you can run that will turn it off. It is blessed by Apple, created by Apple, designed by Apple to turn off the orange dot. But it is hard enough that you can't do it easily. So this is something for production people like us to get into. And I think the assumption is that if you're going to go that deep, it's probably your computer. So anyway, so that's how you can turn off the orange dot. And I believe you have to be in Sonoma. I don't think you can do it in Monterey. So, or you have to be in, what are we in now? Not Sonoma, but I believe you need to be in, and I can't keep track of all these names. Yeah, it is Sonoma. Yeah, okay. And the next one is the Ventura. Yeah. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Friday, 3 p.m. Central, TWiTtv Club members are meeting in Discord to discuss a cloud transition and closing down the Twit offices next month. What does this mean for TWiT.tv and for Office Hours followers of TWiT.tv and Alex? And he's got a link there to Lisa Laporte, some article, I think.
I don't think it has any immediate effect. I think that Twit is, looking for a way to find equilibrium with cash coming in and cash going out. And so that office is a lot. And sometimes I feel partially responsible because I'd really tried to persuade Leo to go to video, and I think that's part of what made this whole thing really expensive. So the reality is that 99% of the folks just listen to these podcasts and don't watch the recording. And so having this huge infrastructure to do that is probably more than is necessary. And so I think that scaling down a little bit and then also finding ways to increase the number of subscribers, I think is a key piece of that. So I think Twit is doing absolutely the right thing by scaling down. The offices are a huge overhead. I've had offices, and it's the money going out. It's not oftentimes generating revenue unless it is, and right now it's not. So I think that I think they're doing a great move, and I'm glad that they're also staying in communication. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Sony cameras offer dynamic range optimizer and skin smoothing settings. Thoughts on using these settings while on Zoom meetings?
I don't use any of those settings because I think they all look a little unnatural. I don't know how everyone else feels about these, but I don't like any of the settings that are kind of doing this. Skin smoothing is specifically something I dislike a lot. I feel like everyone, and I know people like to do it or whatever, but I feel like there's this weird, I guess I feel like there's a real opportunity to be authentic, and you can get some good lighting and, have it there. But I think that the camera should really capture who you are. Now, if you do things with analog, I can create a big light, so I guess that's somehow manipulating the situation. But I don't like having digital manipulation because I feel like it feels less real, and I think that we're always striving for something that feels real. It feels like it's the person that we're talking to, and the more we get away from that, the more disconnected we feel. There's this, I've talked about it before, but there's the frontal lobe of your mind that is saying, this is whatever it is, right? This is that person I'm talking to. And then there's the lower brain that is sensing that something's wrong. so that they're not, it's not getting what it wants. And so when the frontal lobe says I'm getting what I need, and the lower brain is saying I'm not getting what I need, the delta between the two, how disconnected those two are, I define as depression. And I think people get depressed and they feel disconnected, when their lower brain isn't being fed and their upper brain says it should be, that this should be food, and the lower brain's like, this is not food. So I think that we need to, I'm always looking for how do we make it as connected as possible. And I think that these kinds of things take it away. The dynamic range optimizer, I think that's just I believe that the dynamic range optimizer is just a knee at the top. I mean, all it's doing is not being a linear curve. It's kind of rolling off a little bit. And it may be, doing a little bit of tone mapping from the raw image. That's probably fine. It has an opportunity to look really weird, but I haven't used it, so I don't know. But the skin smoothing is definitely something I would not use. Next question.
David Brady in New York City. Up next, what practical uses would running a PC emulator have on iOS? No side loading needed, and he's got a link.
You're really committed to running PC apps on your iOS? Like, I don't know why someone would do that. I don't know what the practical effect of that would be. I guess that would make sense. Nick, can you think of any PC app that you would want to run on your iPhone? Oh, can't hear you. Oh, can't hear you, Nick. Oh, still can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. It's my bad. I use PCs for PCs and Macs for Macs. I avoid, I think it's a kind of a desperate scenario if all I've got is Macs and there is something like maybe Motion Builder that I want to run it only runs on PC, Windows. Maybe I would kind of force that just so that I can use my nice lightweight, long life battery MacBook Air to run Motion Builder. But I'm trying to get away from that too anyway. So.
Next question.
Chuck Hodges in Tuolumne, California. What happened to the audio for this past momentous Monday show? Did I miss the link? I really wanted to listen to the show during work, but wasn't easy on the ears.
Oh, I think this was from last week. We had some bandwidth issues between the ground and the cloud. So, and that was, again, that Monday session, that was not last night, I think probably sounded fine because it was going from the cloud to the cloud. You'll see things happen as we figure out how to do cloud the best. And so as we kind of experiment with it, that's part of what Monday is. Obviously, part of Monday is experimenting with a new format, which is a little more conversational. It's also there to experiment with new technologies. We're using Vector, but it wasn't Vector that had that problem. It was just the way that connection, that linkage was there. So that's what caused that. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas says, do a comparative analysis of Grok, Gemini, ChatGPT, Perplexity at $200 a year, and Claude, and give examples of how you use AI.
What I can say is that I don't use. I've opened up Grok, asked it something once, and then gone, okay. Gemini, I have very little experience with. ChatGPT, I use every day. I'm learning Claude. Perplexity, I know a lot of people that use it. I haven't really used it that heavily. I will say that, and then we add Midjourney to it. I will say that I use it to brainstorm. So far I haven't done a lot of final output with AI. What I use it to do is think about things like tell me about this, or tell me about that, or what would you do here, or how would this work, and I'm not even, I don't have even the assumption that it has to be 100% accurate. It gives me a way to think about things, which I then oftentimes Google or read more about or whatever. But it kind of points me in the right direction. Sometimes it's like, I'm trying to do this, and what would that be called, or what would I use there? And it would give me a bunch of stuff. Now I'll go research those things. And so I find it to be very, very useful as kind of as a helper there. But I haven't used it as much for those others that what it seems like a lot of people are using, which is final output. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So, I mean, AI is a bit broader. I mean, these are all generative, I think, solutions. And so there's two primary areas that I'm personally leveraging them. One is, like you just said, Alex, ideation. So I can put in I know I want to do a thing, but sometimes, it's just staring at the blank page. I'm not sure which direction I want to go in with a concept or an idea. And it's great to be able to iterate some ideas. And sometimes it's not even using the idea that the generative system creates, but it's just, that gives me my own idea, and then I can put that away and move forward. And also just efficiency, productivity. Just sometimes, again, looking at a blank document, I know I have to write this thing. I just don't. What am I going to say? What are the right words? And going into a generative system, being able to say, okay, what would be a good way to start a letter that says this, or I need to type a memo or a proposal, and getting that information together. It's also I'm also using it for research, and not expecting that the generative solution is necessarily giving me the most accurate information, but it can give a overarching kind of overview or outline of like, well, if you want to start an NGO, here are some things to look at. And well, what other NGOs are in this area? Well, there's all these NGOs. And then I can go and look more definitively at the source material to, find out more detail and make sure I'm checking accuracy. But a lot of times I just don't even know where to start if I'm looking into something that's so new to me that the generative systems help point the right direction.
That's exactly what I see oftentimes for myself, is that it allows me to start thinking about something and understand the terms, understand their relationships, understand those things, and then after that you go back to hard research and finding things. But you don't even, a lot of times, what I love about it is being able to just kind of randomly describe what I'm trying to do and give me some tips on how to do that, and it will, and then that gets me on the playing field. I also find it to be very good for recipes. Probably half of what I cook is from ChatGPT. Go ahead, Bill.
Paul, I'm really shocked that you didn't pull out your iPhone, launch Claude, and ask it to do this analysis just to see whether it prioritized itself.
I also use, of course, Midjourney a lot. That wasn't listed here, but I use Midjourney a lot for example. Like, it's, again, not a technical diagram of something, but a lot of times something that is demonstrative or entertaining, or other things like that are fun. And it can be very simple types of things. Let me see if I can find a good example is, like, I needed a "Will Be Right Back" slide for something I was working on, and I put in this. It's like a little robot. And, this was one of, like, maybe, I don't know, 50 photos that were created in about 10 minutes. It wasn't wide enough, so I went into Photoshop to use the generative AI to extend it out in front of him so that I could frame him over to one side. But then there's also, like, the joke of where you're talking to someone, you're working on something, and you want to send you want to send an image, and you go, it's a crazy day, and so you have the photoreal version of "This is fine," which is always a good time. So entertaining is a big piece of AI for me. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael wonders, are the RIAA's actions against AI music companies similar to their initial resistance to digital music sharing in the early 2000s? And he's got a link to a Mix Online magazine article.
Well, I think that you're always, whoever the incumbent is, always wants to make sure that they maintain their position in that area. I think that the arguments that are made against AI are going to be hard to win. I don't necessarily think that they shouldn't win. I just think that they're difficult arguments to make because what the AI is doing is being trained against a whole bunch of things. It's not copying verbatim what those things are. And so if you listen to a bunch of music and then you made your own music and it wasn't using the same notes, but it was inspired by that, that would be okay. And the problem with that right, what I just said there, is that that's what judges are going to see. Like, they're just going to be like, and, like, they're not going to be able to understand. I don't think they're going to look at it like that it's taking pieces out of it, because it's not. It is building a neural network, to be honest, no one really knows what it's doing. They just kind of have created an environment and it's doing the thing that it does, but it very rarely is copying something. So so I think that that's going to be the difficult thing. And I think that a lot of money, the danger of the lawsuits is that a lot of money is sitting on the sidelines because they don't know whether who's going to win. And as soon as they do know, they could unwrap it. The problem is this is going to take 3 to 5 years for them to get to the Supreme Court. And then if they win, it's so embedded into the world that it'll be almost impossible to unwind. And if they lose, a lot more money goes into the system. So I don't know if there's a win-win. There's no win for the copyright holders right now, I don't think. And that's the challenge. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. Loopback and Mimo Live seem to be still incompatible since the major switch away from the ACE framework. Is Black Hole the permanent workaround moving forward for Mimo Live workflows?
I think that it actually, I believe that I tested it successfully with 2.4.1 from Loopback. I will admit that I'm still using Black Hole because I kind of set that infrastructure up, and sometimes I don't get back around to it. But I believe I opened up one of my older ones and actually ran it. But 2.4.0 does not work. But I do believe that 2.4.1 is delivering audio now to the system. So you may want to take a look at looking at making sure that you have the latest and greatest. And if not, definitely reach out to Rogue Amiibo. They've been really responsive in this area. I think that they're pretty clear that there's some issues that happen there, and so they're trying to sort that out. So definitely look for, if it's not working, let them know. Be very specific. So they need to know exactly what the symptoms are. You're using what operating system, what computer, what version of Loopback, what version of Mimo. Make sure you have the newest version of Mimo Live as well. And then let them know what the symptoms are. Is it broken audio? Is it not showing up at all? And they, because I know that they've been trying to work all those things out. I will admit that I moved to Black Hole and haven't moved back for my daily show, mostly just because I haven't had time to do the DX. But I did open it and test it and thought that I got good audio there. So, but we'll have to go back and look at that. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Wallace again in Hot Springs, Arkansas. What technology was used to generate this AI fashion walk that has gone viral on X? And he's got a link to it.
Go ahead, Nick.
So I think I found what might be the original on a YouTube channel called Interdimensional TV, and they say that it was done with Midjourney and Luma Labs. So both of those are publicly accessible AI systems, and I feel like someone stumbled on, oh, this was fun. I did it with this one person. Let me try this world leader and this world leader and this famous person. You could definitely see the artifacts in it. I mean, I don't think it would pass as a real event, but it's definitely amusing.
I still have the sound coming out of it. Hold on, let's see if we can cut to this. So this is the.
Are you trying to take a look at the video?
I was just trying to show it here. So here we go. This is the.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, this is the. Yeah. So. And again, it is. Yeah. So they're having fun with the whole thing. I think that one of the things about AI right now, and we'll see how serious it gets, but satire is a big wide open spot for AI, of having fun with things that I think, I'm not as worried, I think, as many people are about the, I think that people should not have been believing what they saw for a long time. And so the fact that now it's becoming clearer to them that what they're seeing may not be totally true, I think is a healthy place to be. Next question.
Anawahahi Black Bear Marshall in the Oahe Nation says, no audio today anywhere, frowny face, with people who listen only to the show said to be the biggest number of the live audience here. How are these people supposed to connect to the show? What missing piece in the tech or the product needs to be overcome?
I'm feeling this is for Monday, and generally this is a Sunday question, but I'll address it once here. We're working on Monday. Monday's a minimal viable product. It's not fully cooked. so it's a new thing, and so it doesn't have lower thirds right now. It doesn't have a lot of other things. It is, and so adding more detail to it right now would make it just more cumbersome to get off the ground. So a lot of times, it's still available. You can still listen to it over YouTube. So you can open up YouTube and listen to it there. But I'm not going to promise anything when we get new products off the ground. I think everybody wants to have everything all the time, and then nothing gets done. So I'm, a lot of times I'm looking for minimum viable product, get it up, get it off, figure it out, get it into a pattern, and then start adding detail. We didn't have an audio version of this show for years. So, an audio only version for maybe 2 or 3 years. So I think that it will eventually arrive, but we're not. There's a lot of other things for us to sort out before we work on that. So that I just want to manage your expectations. The Makana feed is working. I think the question is, this is a question I think that was related to last night, because we're building it in the cloud and we don't have the audio repeater in the cloud the way we have it on the ground. So that's why Mondays are not going to be audio only there. And again, there's this thing called YouTube, and it's free and it's there. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Alex, you hit the nail on the head with the physical office space being money going out with dubious value coming in. Are most of the corporate return to office mandates from companies with extensive sunk real estate costs?
Go ahead, Nick.
I don't know if sunk costs necessarily are going to be the most driving factor. I mean, certainly there's going to be that, but I think that in general, anyone with facilities, with real estate offices, really need to be looking at what is the purpose of coming into the office? What are we able to do there that we can't do effectively remotely? And part of this is that, I'm, of course, from a generation that did work in person extensively and regularly, and that was the only way we knew. But we have to realize that the generations of folks that are coming into the workforce now are digital natives, that not just did they go through COVID and college and high school and such using Zoom and remote technologies, but even before that, they grew up interacting with their friends using online games. And so the idea of interacting effectively remotely is not at all alien. That's the native state for this new set of talent coming up. So I definitely view in person as being it has value. There are things that you can only do in person. There are facilities, equipment, etc., and maximize that, and so that you're making the most of that facility and not simply forcing people to go into a facility to do something that they could do remotely. We could save a lot of fuel burned and time lost in commutes, and there's numerous other benefits to remote when it's done effectively.
I think a lot of it has to do with the inadequacies of managers who don't understand how to manage something online. Like, they just can't get their head around how to do it. And so it has to do with a generation of managers that just don't understand it. And that can be executives as well, that don't understand how to do that effectively. There are definitely companies that have built up around being remote, where everybody is all over the world, and they have figured it out and they get a lot of productivity out of it. And what's interesting is a lot of times the folks that are not driving into work may not work at the same pace, but still get as much done. And oftentimes, most studies show more done because they're not giving up 2 hours a day to driving in and out of work. And so, so a lot of that is time, and then you have a lot more. Oftentimes, they're happier with what they do. Not always, but definitely some group of people. We have to remember that it's not. The issue is that a little bit of a. I believe that the return to work is a little bit of a tyranny of the extroverts. Is that there's what we find is there's about 30% of the people that really love to have human interaction, and there's 30% of the population that hates lots of interaction, or not hates it, but strongly dislikes it. And then there's 30% that could take it or leave it, and that seems to be about that seems to be a rough third. And when you look at a lot of polls and so on and so forth, you kind of see this rough third of people. And the extroverts oftentimes are the ones that are the leaders in the company. They're the ones that like to interact with everybody. They're the ones that do those things. And so a lot of times those extroverts are the ones that, feel like they need to have people around them, because that's how extroverts work. and the introverts would really rather be home, like, or rather have their own office, and definitely don't want to be in a, the being all stuffed together with a bunch of other people, and so having a whole bunch of tables and being shoulder to shoulder with somebody else. So the issue is the extroverts are, running the show, and they want people to be in the office, and so as a result, they're pulling people back, and the introverts don't really want to come. And again, a lot of the folks that I've worked with in a lot of these companies, it's amazing to watch people who love their job, love the people they work with, love what they're working on, and they're thinking of leaving, because this doesn't line up for them. And when a company is successful at doing that, they should really think hard about their life choices, because you're taking employees that are productive and excited about the product and turning them off over something that you should just learn how to do. And so for them, at least, let the extroverts come into the office and hang out with each other. Let the introverts. And I think that I think what's interesting is that a lot of people have found that that you are going to have less upward mobility if you're not in headquarters or not in the main office. In fact, many companies, if you're not in headquarters, you're not going to have as much of an upward mobility. And what they're finding is a lot of people don't care. They'd still rather work at home. They'd still rather have the flexibility that they had before, doing that. And so I think that's the real challenge. So I think that's, and I think that, people have to get their head around that process. And I think that what's happening, at least what we're seeing, is that people are just checking, just spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. You'll see LinkedIn, a lot of times they're promoting things as remote, for jobs, and that's one of the ways that you can take people who have more skill than you can afford out of the company that they're working on, is to say they can work at home, and so smaller companies and companies that are more aggressive and I'll say more advanced than the companies that are asking everyone to return to work are basically stealing their workers, it's not something that happens overnight. It's not like everybody's going to do this or everybody's going to do that. But the main thing is that you're seeing this slow draw out of a certain group of people that are just leaving the companies that they're working for to work for companies that allow them to do what they want to do. And I think that you're going to continue to see that over the next decade, especially as the technology to work remote gets better. So companies, I think, will have to figure it out, or they'll have a hard time maintaining talent. Next question.
Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. How does this panel rate the productions of coverage of our Republican National Convention? Who did it best? Who did it worst? And what could be done better? And that's our QR code question.
I have no idea, because I felt like this one came up a couple of times, so I was kind of ignoring it because I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I find the conventions to be just absurd. Both of them, not one or the other. I'm just like, and I used to work on them, by the way. So if someone pays me to go to the convention, I'm all in, and I'm happy to stream the conventions. I streamed 2012 and 2016 for both sides. So I've been to a lot of the conventions, and I've watched a lot of the conventions from the inside. And there's no way I'd actually sit around watching it, you'd have to pay me. Literally, people paid me to watch it. But that's the only way you get me to watch a convention. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. I've now ruined it, by the way. I'm never going to work on another convention because people are going to see this clip and they're going to be like, oh, he doesn't really care. You actually want people who don't care to work on your projects, don't care about the subject matter, because all they do is they pay attention. I just pay attention. Someone asked me because I worked both the RNC and DNC in 2012 and 2016. And they asked me, so what's your politics? I'm like, that everybody sounds great and is in focus. That's all I care about. I care about my craft. I care about it looking good. I don't care what they're saying. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, in terms of coverage this year, and myself, I'm consuming much more of my news information from YouTubers, like non-major network sources that are aggregating, the network sources, and they provide their own commentary. And honestly, I try to gather, in terms of consuming this information, gather it from both sides of the aisle and see, what one side of the aisle is saying about the other, and vice versa, to try and get an understanding of what what's going on. But I did not watch any network coverage of it whatsoever. It was almost entirely what happened yesterday and what's being said by these analysts on YouTube today about what happened yesterday.
Yeah, and I just don't know how it's going to change my life. Like I just don't know how. And we were talking before the show of like how to get a lot of things done. Is one thing is to say no to a lot of things, and so unless something is really compelling, I'm not going to put it on. I watch about an hour of TV a day, and that's with my family, and we have like a show that we like to watch, and it's more of a communal thing for us than it is anything else. And I'm not going to burn up a lot of time watching things that aren't going to change my life. Next question.
John Bontrager in Cincinnati, Ohio says musician dies from electrocution, allegedly caused from a hug from a soaked fan. Could this have been prevented?
Yes. I mean, you can absolutely prevent things. Electrocution is something that can be prevented. Oftentimes it's hard to calculate every possible outcome. Obviously there's a lot of safety rules, and when we see open power, or we know that there's a lot of power, we really do try to space people around and we pay attention. But when things are busy, it's very easy to not calculate all the opportunities for something to go wrong. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
There's a lot of things that I will pitch in and help with on the productions that I've worked in over the years. The electrical is not one of them, and it's for this kind of reason. I'm reminded of watching Jeff Keithley's when he took us on a tour of one of the big tennis events he did. One of the things that caught my eye was he had run a lot of cables on the backstop. He was at this tennis thing, and there were a lot of chain link fence, so he'd run a lot of the cables about 4 or 5 feet up along the fence using zip ties. And I was trying to think about it. I thought, oh, of course, if it rains, he doesn't want all of his cabling in water down at the bottom. That is not, electricity always finds the path of least resistance, and water is a conductor. So you really need people who truly know what they're doing in terms of the safety of these kind of things if you're in a public place working with that. And we've heard from concerts for decades of somebody not getting the grounding right and somebody saying, gosh, I picked up my guitar and I got a shock from it. You can't see electricity, but it certainly can have a health impact. So it's an area where I don't mess around at all, and I would advise everybody to do the same thing. If you're dealing with anything other than DC low-voltage power, hire some people who really understand this, certified, qualified electricians, and have them do the work.
Next question.
Leon in Vienna says, what's the use case for the new unique speaker mode in Zoom ISO? The changelog mentions open Q&A, but what does that use case gain?
It's so great. I was looking forward to this answer to come up. So this is something that I don't think I'm the only one that asked for it, but definitely something that I had made a request for. So here's what happens with Zoom ISO. You've got, let's say, 4 speakers. And the reason it's good for Q&A is that you've got 4 speakers. Let's say those are your key speakers, and you've taken that Zoom ISO out for those 4, but you're building a show. And you're feeding it back into Zoom, to see it, or even you're just doing it. You have another show that's streaming out. The bottom line is that when they open up for Q&A, what happens is you want to use active speaker. You want to say just grab the active speaker audio out. But the problem with that is that you'll double up. You'll have the teacher, let's say, going out, and then they'll come in an active speaker. What Unique Speaker does is it says, I'm going to ignore anybody that I'm already taking out with Zoom ISO. So if they're already getting pulled out with Zoom ISO, it's anybody else in the meeting except for the people that have been identified as individuals that I'm pulling out of the system. And so it's one of those things. I'm really glad you asked it, Leon, because it's one of those things that if you didn't see it, you wouldn't really know what that meant. And it's super powerful. If you're building shows where you're going to have Q&A, this solves a big problem because you can't identify every person. Let's say you're in a room with 50 or 100 people in a meeting. You can't identify every person and try to pull them out. You need the active speaker to work for that audio, but you can't pull the same ones that you're already pulling. And so that's what Unique Speaker does. It's genius, and I'm really glad that Zoom added it. It just shows you, in my opinion, that Zoom is just head and shoulders over every other solution to get stuff out, because they add these kinds of features that are really high end, features that are really needed, that make a true difference. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Can't hear you, Nick.
Thanks, Alex. I just wanted to check. So it sounds like you'll get like an audio feed mix of all of the panelists that are in Zoom ISO that are not identified for isolated.
It's everyone
audio,
except for the isolated audio folks that come out on isolated audio. So it's everyone.
So anyone else?
If you've pulled those 4 people out or 5 people out, they're removed from that calculation. So they will not show up in the active speaker, in the unique speaker output. It's everybody else. So let's say you have 4 speakers that are in a meeting with 80 people, but you're going to do an open Q&A. People are going to raise their hand and they're going to ask questions. How do I get the audio easily of the people asking questions without doubling up on the speakers? Like with active speaker, you would get 2 outputs. You would get an output of the speaker, and so if you're feeding that back into your mix, that becomes problematic, right? That's
Gotcha.
Like if you're doing a stream. So if you're streaming, let's say you're streaming that or recording it or doing anything else, you have the speakers, but you can't have them come out the other audio again, or they'll double up, especially on a live event.
Got it.
So you need to be able to get those 4 individual or 8 individual, whatever it is, however many individual ISOs you're pulling out. The unique speaker is anybody other than those folks, and so it just and because it knows who everybody is, it can do that. Does that make sense?
Now it makes sense. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
It's a really powerful tool. Next, when you understand it, it changes the way you can do meetings and events and stream them. It's a game changer. It's just very obscure, a very obscure game changer. So I really wanted to make sure we hammered it and talked about it because it's a really important feature. Next question.
Yet another QR code question up. This one from Gene J. Anthony in Skokie, Illinois. All Thunderbolt 4 cables are not made equal. What specs should I look for when considering the purchase of an 8K T4 USB-C to DisplayPort cable?
So I do believe that Thunderbolt cables are all made equal. I think that but what you're looking for 8K, because I don't think that there's a T4 to DisplayPort. I believe that there's USB-C to DisplayPort. And in that case, you're probably looking for a 3.2 USB that's got the guaranteed of, I think, 100 or 10 gigs a second or whatever. So, but I don't believe that there is a T4 to DisplayPort. As soon as you add a DisplayPort on one side of it, I do believe that that's a USB-C to DisplayPort. And they definitely are not made equal. So it's that's generally a pretty big challenge. Next question.
Harold Williams in Portsmouth, Virginia. Can one X32 control another X32 over the internet?
Not that I know of, and I'm not sure why I'd want to do that. The way you would do that is, the way you control an X32 over the internet is typically with some kind of control software. There's some software that you can get for X32s. You can also you could build a pipe VPN or port forwarding that would allow you to take a physical controller and have it, like the XTouch or other things like that, and connect it. I guess you could, Tim mentioned you could use OSC, so you could potentially have it sending OSC back. I don't know how that would work. I don't know why, again, and I don't know why you do it. So you'd have to be maybe more specific about what you're trying to achieve there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Tascam is now selling the ST2110 expansion card for their Sonic View compact mixer range. Could you see their mixers going well with Blackmagic Designs 2110 products? And he's got a link to a magazine article.
They could if they worked on the compatibility with BMD's 2110. So I think it depends. It depends on whether they're following, they're connecting those dots together and working with them. And it seems like it would be useful to do that. But especially because I think Tascam lives more in that world that might be interesting to Blackmagic users. So it would be useful to see how that works. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City. What is the best solution to record ATEM Mini Extreme ISO recordings? I had a show where the SanDisk Extreme SSD 2 terabyte got full with only 50 gigabytes of used space. What else can I use to record the shows?
Go ahead, Nick.
So lately I've been using the SanDisk Ultra rather than Extreme on our ATEM ISO. I have noticed that if I don't format that SSD from time to time, that it's possible that the write speed slows down, so that the use of that drive, adding files, deleting files. I prefer to do a format of that to make sure that we've got like a clean block of open space in there. I've never seen it indicate that it was full. Even the ATEM doesn't indicate that the drive is full if it's got 50 gigabytes. But I have had one or two instances where I haven't formatted in a while. I've been doing a lot of recording, and would record, delete, and then the write speed slows down, and so I have drop frames, and the ATEM stops recording to it, and there's kind of like a flashing red indicator. But if I format it from time to time, that seems to be doing well. And again, I'm using the Ultra version of the SanDisk SSD, 2 terabyte.
One of the things I think in the last update of the ATEM to 951, they stopped recognizing NVMEs. so I think that so keep that in mind. I think that might have been also trying to take into account that some drives don't work as well as others. I will say that I don't use SanDisk products anymore. I have a couple of the Extremes that had so many failures with SanDisks, from their SSDs to the newer drives. I've just decided that I'm past that. so I just won't buy them anymore. So it's probably a read write error. I think that I'm curious as to whether you had any heat or whether it was a hot day. So where these drives oftentimes become, and given where you work, you may have been, it may have been a really hot day. So I'd be curious as to know whether it was particularly hot. I would say over 30 degrees Celsius. Like, was it as the drives heat up, they become less efficient. And that could have been something that affected it to make it actually happen there. But one thing I would recommend is an external no heat. Eduardo said, I don't know. The one of the things that I always try to do is record the program. So take one of your HDMI outputs from the Mini Extreme and record that program to a separate device. So you at least have the program. So you can try to get all the ISOs, you can try to get everything else, but walk away with program. And if you can, walk away with program and clean. And so something possibly that you can loop through. Like, for instance, I loop my Extreme right here that's sitting in front of me, loops through a hyperdeck, the little shuttle, and then goes to my Wacom tablet. So I can draw on it. But the key there is it goes through that process so that I have a place to record my show if I want to. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. Oh.
Alex, if you're not using SanDisk, do you mind if I ask what you're using these days?
Samsung. Yeah. So I use Samsung. I still have a lot of T5s, and then a little tweaky about the T7s because we had a lot of trouble with them with the cameras. And then so those, but the Samsungs are what I'm using most of the time. And I haven't had too much trouble. I record now. I will admit that I don't record from the Extreme. I've had enough trouble with the Extremes trying to record them, so I'm in the same boat that I've kind of. I don't depend on it. Like, it's kind of a cute little thing that I play with to see, but I don't do anything that's mission critical. When I'm working on mission critical things, I typically have full sized hyperdecks is kind of and still miss the old Hyperdeck Pros because they had analog audio in, which is super useful. Like, I think my guess is the only reason that Blackmagic took those out is because of the AKM fire, that it was really expensive to get A to D converters, because having analog I/O in the Hyperdeck and we still use some of them because of that. Because, like, so for instance, I did I just did and you really have to be better with time code and everything else if you're not going to have that. I just did a show where I've got 4 cameras over 8 hours of content, and I need to line those up to do a multicam edit. And because I fed audio into each one of them together, you just stick them into Final Cut or Resolve and just say, line it up based on the audio, and they're all done. Because they all got clean audio. They all went, it was all embedded into the system. And so it makes it much, it's as fast as time code to do that. And so it was really, really easy. But without that, now you have to figure out how you're going to embed audio into all these things. And that's a tricky business. So that's the hard part. Or you run audio to all the cameras so they all have it. Which is a little annoying. Next question.
Next one comes from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. I like the extra hours discussion on troubleshooting. Is the goal for extra hours to address technological and philosophical issues?
I don't know if we have a necessarily a high goal of how it's going to look. Extra hours is really Grant's show, so Grant is thinking about those things, and so I'm tagging along. But I think that one of the things we wanted to do is have it be more conversational. I know that was one of the discussions and to see whether that's effective or not. Like, for instance, right now, the average view time is considerably lower than the show. And so which is an interesting puzzle. But again, it's a data point along a long string of what that looks like. It's a brand new show. We're still figuring it out. And there's a lot of things we're still doing. We're also figuring out how to do production in the cloud, which I think has been pretty successful. So we're figuring that out, but we're figuring that format out. We're figuring out what we want to cover. We will figure out how we want the conversation to work. At first we started with nothing on the back end that let us manage things, but we kind of slipped back into it because it works so well. So anyway, I think that's also part of what we're kind of dancing with as we start to figure that out. So you'll continue to see us experiment with it. It's brand new. We were, again, we barely figured out the format in 6 months for this show. Maybe even, I would say, even maybe a year and a half before we really figured this one out. So I think that there's still some time. We just did episode 4 yesterday, which would have been only less than a week of what we're doing here. So there's still a lot of time in front of us to figure it out. Let us know what you think, and we'll keep working on it. Next question.
Next one comes from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles. The Lightcraft Jet Set Cine app looks like an innovative tracker, but where does it fit into professional virtual production? And he's got a YouTube link to it.
Yeah, I keep on meaning to bring Elliot on. So these guys Lightcraft has been working on this for a very, very long time. So seeing who they have covering it, but so they were doing a lot of pre-visualization tracking for the film industry for a very long time, and they've applied it now to the phone. And so I'm trying to see if I can find a good clip of this. But what it does is it allows you to track and do. Here they have. Let's see if I can pull this up here real quick. So here you can see there's someone in front of a green screen. It's pulling that green screen, but it's also tracking them into the scene. So you can see that you can actually see how it is totally tied in. So your ability to previs that process and see how it's actually going to look is pretty powerful. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've really leveraged that pre-visualization skill set in a great way. I mean, on a AAA tentpole virtual production LED stage, they're going to be using Vicon or OptiTrack optical tracking, and that gives just absolutely solid, completely gen-locked sub-millimeter accuracy tracking of the camera. And that'll also be used in broadcast scenarios in most cases. But those systems cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so the full Cine, most expensive version of this Lightcraft solution is it's less than $1,000 a year. You can get it a subscription. You can use an iPhone. And I think that what they're really I don't have any inside information about the technology they're doing, but today with iPhone Pros, iOS Pros having LiDAR as well as video live tracking and, of course, the IMU, all of that data can be combined to get a very effective track. So, if you're not making a multi-million-dollar production, you can get really far down the road and produce some really great content with a fraction of the equipment investment this way. And so it's a very, very attractive solution. And even, the Vive Mars system that has been like the low cost entry level virtual production camera tracking, that's a $5,000 piece of hardware. And again, this solution is, their top end version with all its Cine features is less than $1,000 per year. So I think there's a really great, use case there, value point that's definitely worth looking at if you're in that indie kind of production, pre-visualization, absolutely.
And there's something that, being able to just pick up your phone and do it is really, really powerful. One of the things that we always say about visual effects is you never finish visual effects, you just run out of time. It's never all the way done. And so the more fluid and the easier it is for you to figure things out and the faster your iteration rate is, the better it's going to be, typically. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Does anyone have a great solution for series content development involving multiple people and approvals, including show topics and scheduling? Our org originally subscribes to Office 365, so Teams may be our medicine?
One of the things that people hate to hear is that you might have to have a bunch of meetings. I work on a lot of stuff that requires a lot of stakeholders to make a lot of decisions, and I have found that it just works better if we have meetings that are constantly tracking those and we're discussing them. Now, someone is in Google Teams or Google Docs or whatever, and they're filling those things out. And oftentimes it's most effective if it's a screen share and they're filling it out with everybody else so everyone can give their 2 cents, but you've now captured it. There's a temptation to want to make everything asynchronous and have everybody but it just doesn't happen. You can get little things done, but a lot of times everybody getting together once a week, if you're on a larger project, once a week, twice a week to talk through things but have someone annotating those in a fairly transparent way so everyone can see what's being decided on is much more effective than it seems on the surface. A lot of people, there's a joke that says, meetings, there's one of my favorite poster series is called Despair. Like despair.com. I think it's called Despair. I think it's despair.com. And it's just a bunch of they call them demotivational posters. And they and one of them is they have all they do those those inspirational posters, but then they put a different thing at the bottom. And and it'll have things like they have one where they have you see a bunch of penguins and it says, "Until you spread your wings, you'll never know how far you can walk." And so in this one it says meetings, because none of us are as dumb as all of us. And so it's and I actually worked somewhere where they put that in the conference room. It was really a funny thing to put in the conference room. So anyway, but what I will say is well-organized meetings make a huge difference. And I'm now in lots and lots of meetings. I mean, I'm in probably 6 hours of meetings a day, not including this one. And when people show up on time, when they're fairly focused about what they're talking about, when they go through a checklist of the things that they need to cover, and they all kind of agree on it, they're very, very effective at moving ideas down the path. And I think that people underestimate how powerful that is. And I think that it's worth doing. So really having group, you don't have to have everybody in the group, but breaking it up and having those conversations is really, really useful. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, number one, have a good producer. There just isn't a replacement for a person who is super organized, type A, and loves to do that. Like that is their jam. Anytime someone like that is on a project, things are going to get done. And it almost doesn't matter too much as to whether they're using an Excel spreadsheet or Canva or, any of these bespoke tools. But just when you have a good person producing. You can give them extra tools like AI to transcribe meetings and build out outlines, and that's all great to make them even more efficient. But when you have that person who thrives on keeping things organized and working as a teammate as opposed to necessarily just a poker, and sometimes you need a person that's poking. So that's number one. And then there are some tools out there that are designed for this. I mean, ShotGrid came from, used to be called Shotgun, and now it's called ShotGrid, I think, is designed to be like a back-end approval system. And, especially if it's episodic, if it's a series content, and so your pipeline is in place and you know all the steps that you're going to go through, you can kind of template that out in something like ShotGrid, and approvals can be done remotely and fairly straightforwardly. But again, just have someone who really knows what they're doing and loves what they're doing to be on top of that stuff.
Next question.
Russell K. in Brooklyn, Maine says, Mickey mentioned in the chat that Zoom's 32-bit float is not a true implementation as sound devices. Is he here today, or can someone explain further?
This was spoken to last week. I would probably leave it to the discussion that we had last week. If you look at Nathan Moody, who, by the way, that was a great second hour in general, but look at that discussion, because he digs into specifically the difference between sound devices 32-bit float and Zoom's 32-bit float, and why he prefers sound devices for that. And so I would take a look at that discussion, because I thought I would watch that whole second hour if I were you. Nathan was amazing. So definitely check that out. Next question.
Tlaloc Lopez Waterman in Brevard, North Carolina right now. My summer work has a drawback: glacial internet. The 2 summer festivals that I have worked this summer have been afflicted with this problem. Currently trying to upload large files to Frame.io. Curious, does anyone have favorite co-working space companies?
All I can say is that I generally like ones that aren't giant brands. So WeWork and some of the other ones. What's the other one that's we use a lot? They're okay. They just tend to be overpriced. For the price that it would cost to rent their space for 3 or 4 hours, you could just get SpaceX. I mean, just my brain dropped that word, but you could just go get Starlinks. That would work. So a Starlink is going to cost you X amount of money, then it's going to cost you X amount a month, and that's probably going to be less than using the co-working space. So that's just something to think about if all you need is internet. Otherwise, I think that a lot of times try to get a day pass at one that's nearby and see and then test its internet. But the problem is you have to know what time, because a lot of these, your bandwidth is going to vary based on who's there. So you might need to know that you're going to come in at the end of the day or the very beginning of the day, usually at the end of the day, to come in and upload and download things, because, depending on how they have it set up, if you get into a space and it is a hard limit of like 20 megs up or down, then you know that they're managing it. You're not going to get any better than that, but you're also probably not going to get much worse. If you get into a space and it gives you 300 or 400, it means that it's very time sensitive about when it makes sense for you to do that. So those are things to kind of look at, whether it's a hotel or something else. Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York says, morning, everyone. I have a series of hardcover books I'd like to convert to digital books. What device and software should I be looking at to achieve this?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I apologize that I don't have a specific recommendation other than this. To me, sounds like something I would search for a service that does. I just feel like if I were to purchase any kind of scanner that was intended and actually really good at scanning a hardcover book, that I would use it for this series of books and then never again. And that scanner is probably going to be expensive, and it's going to take space, and it's not going to be something I ever want to throw away. Whereas I'm sure there must be a service that does this at an economic price point. So I don't have a specific recommendation, but I would definitely look for a service to do this.
We'll be talking about character animation here in just a second. Just a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow we'll be talking about miking instruments. So it's our audio day. So we'll be talking about miking instruments, so stay tuned for that. On Thursday, Ben Kolak, a filmmaker, will be on. And he has worked as a documentary cinematographer, editor, producer, and director. He'll be talking about, and he's also a drone pilot. So he's going to be here to answer your questions about that. And on Friday, we have the NDI Super Panel. And so that is, a lot of times people ask NDI questions and we're like, well, we'll see how, whether we can answer these. This is going to be the panel. So if you have questions about NDI, almost any question about NDI, this is going to be the right place to do it on Friday. Saturday, of course, is a weekend Q&A. Sunday is our introspection day where we chew on things a little bit. And a place for you to talk about your concerns, your questions, your ideas for office hours. That's the best place to do it is on Sunday. A reminder that we have our volunteer meeting on 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. So hopefully if you're interested in finding out more about the opportunities, come join us.